Jack understood me as no one did before. We've been together ever since, and he loves me just the way I am. In fact, he proposed a few weeks ago, and you can bet I said yes. My parents are so happy for us, and we are getting married soon. Nowadays, I identify as a woman, and everyone in my life accepts me that way. To my friends, family, and fiancé, I'm Julia. I finally feel happy and comfortable with who I am. It took me a long time to get here, but I know my journey of self-discovery was worth it. Thank you for watching.
My mom and I were never close, and she only welcomed me around her when my parents had dinner parties for clients. Even their clients would remark, "Diane, I don't see any pictures with you and Victoria, only her and Victor." My mother would always chuckle, "You know girls and their fathers," before changing the conversation. I know it feels strange, but sometimes I feel as though she is not even my mom. My dad, on the other hand, would always make time for me. He gave me everything I asked for, and my mom never seemed to approve. In her eyes, my life was too easy. "You are spoiling her, Victor. She's going to be too soft for this cruel world out there," she said harshly. I often heard her discussing with my dad wanting to send me to a boarding school, but he would hear nothing of the sort and always dismissed her. But before I go on, please don't forget to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell. You will become mega rich when you're older. Every year, my dad would take a yearly trip with his college buddy, Eric. One week after my dad left for his trip, I was home alone watching movies when the phone rang. "Hello?" I said, my focus still on the movie that I was watching. The person on the other end informed me that the plane that my dad and Eric were in crashed, and there were no survivors. The phone fell from my hand and I burst into tears. I cried my eyes out at the funeral, and I felt I had lost the only person who had ever loved me. I felt as though I had lost my best friend. Shortly after the funeral, my father's lawyer approached my mom and I and asked us to meet him at his office later that afternoon. When we arrived at the office, he greeted us. "I'm sorry for your loss. Let's get down to business, shall we?" I sat down. "Do I really need to be here?" I sniffled, my eyes puffy from crying. "I could drop her off at home and come back," my mom said sweetly, rubbing my hand. I looked at her with a raised eyebrow. "You need to be here since this includes you as well," the lawyer said, looking through the papers on his desk. My mom quickly removed her hand from mine and placed them on her lap. The lawyer read the will, and my eyes widened with surprise as my dad left me an inheritance of $5 million while my mom got to keep the house. I was only 16, so my money was placed in an account, and when I reached age 18, the money would be released to me. My mom yelled as she threw her hands up in the air at the lawyer. "What is the meaning of this? Where is my money? I was his wife!" The lawyer handed my mom a letter as he watched her sternly without saying a word. I watched my mom's face contort angrily as her eyes followed the words on the paper. Without another word, my mom stormed out of the office with the letter in her hand. I thanked the lawyer and exited the office. $5 million, I whispered as I headed to the car park. To my surprise, when I got to the car park, my mother was not there. She left without me. Since I did not have any money on me to take a bus, I had no choice but to walk home. The next year of my life was miserable. My mom moved all my things into the garage, and I was only allowed into the house to use the bathroom. "I told your father that the world was a cruel, cruel place, but he doesn't listen. It's time for you to learn how the world works, Victoria," my mother said harshly when I asked her how I was supposed to survive without money. Shortly after my mom moved me to the garage, I took a job at the community library after school since I was no longer given an allowance. At the library, I was able to how I was supposed to survive without money. Shortly after my mom moved me to the garage, I took a job at the community library after school since I was no longer given an allowance. At the library, I was able to get my homework done and do any research that was needed since I no longer had access to a computer at home or even a phone. After completing my homework and all my tasks at the library, I would sit and read stories about the rich and famous. I often dreamed about the lifestyle that I would live once I got my $5 million. One evening, as I sat studying for my exam the next day, the smell of my mom's cooking drifted into the garage and my tummy rumbled. I meekly walked into the kitchen and saw my mom preparing dinner. I clutched my stomach. "Mom, I'm really hungry. I used the last of the money I had to purchase a textbook for school. May I have some dinner, please?" I asked. She retorted, "Use the $5 million your dad gave you to get some food since you were hungry. With $5 million, you could buy anything you want." She cackled before she turned her back on me. That night, I decided to sneak into the house after my mom went to bed to get something to eat. Much to my dismay, when I tried to open the refrigerator, I realized that she placed a lock on it. I looked around at the kitchen cupboards in shock and realized that she placed locks on everything. Even the microwave was locked and chained. That night, I went back to the garage and fell asleep on a hungry stomach. I told myself that I might as well make the best of a bad situation. I tried to clean out the garage on numerous occasions to make it feel more like a living space, something that I could be proud of. But every time I got back home, there were boxes and boxes of junk waiting for me in the garage. After a few months of that back and forth, I decided to just leave it. At least I had my bed to sleep on. About a year after my father's death, while sitting at the desk in the library, a boy around my age walked up. "Hi," he said shyly. I looked up from my magazine. "Hi, can I help you?" He cleared his throat and responded, "My name is Kyle. I've been looking at you for some time." He trailed off. "What do you mean, looking at me?" I asked, now very conscious of my worn-out jeans and t-shirt that I wore. He cleared his throat again. He inhaled deeply before he continued. "I would like to take you out if you're interested." I leaned back into my chair and looked him over. His face was familiar, but I couldn't quite place where I knew him from. "Thanks for the invitation, but I have too many things on my plate at the moment to entertain boys. If, however, you need help to find, return, or check out a book, then I am your girl." He smiled and nodded at me before he turned and walked away. Over the next 2 weeks, I noticed him around the library. He would always leave me little trinkets on my desk, like chocolates and candy. One time he even delivered a bouquet of flowers, vase and all. He checked out a wide variety of books. I suspected that he checked them out just to get to talk to me, and it worked. After about a month of him requesting a date with me, I finally told him yes. We seemed to hit it off from the first date. I would always be waiting outside the house when he drove up, and I would always wait until he pulled off before heading towards the garage. It looked as though my luck was finally turning around. Our favorite place to go was Maria's Pizzeria. We would often order a large pizza and drinks, and I would usually carry the remainders home. During one of our dates, I asked, "So, tell me," as we waited for our pizza to arrive, "where are you from?" I finally told him yes. We seemed to hit it off from the first date. I would always be waiting outside the house when he drove up, and I would always wait until he pulled off before heading towards the garage. It looked as though my luck was finally turning around. Our favorite place to go was Maria's Pizzeria. We would often order a large pizza and drinks, and I would usually carry the remainders home. During one of our dates, I asked, "So, tell me," as we waited for our pizza to arrive, "where are you from? What brought you to this town?" He looked at me from across the booth. "Well, my dad passed away a while back, and I just turned 18. It was just me and him living at home since my mom died when I was young. I knew my dad went to college here, so I sold the house when I reached 18, and here I am," he said dramatically. "Well, I am glad you chose here," I laughed. That night after he dropped me off, I realized that I forgot my jacket in his car. I didn't have a phone to call him. I must have dozed off because I woke up to the sound of my mom quarreling with someone. "Do you know what time it is? Why are you ringing my doorbell at this hour?" I couldn't hear what the other person was saying, but I recognized his voice. It was Kyle. No one by that name lives here.
Baby, put on heart-shaped sunglasses, 'cause we're gonna take a ride.
I felt sick to my stomach. I heard a car drive off. How was I to face him tomorrow? How was I going to tell him that I lived in my mom's garage? That night, I didn't get much sleep. The next few days seemed like a blur as everyone seemed to be in exam mode and the library was packed. Kyle didn't show up at the library the next few days, and I was a bit sad and worried. Luckily, by the time I got home each night, I was too exhausted to overthink and fell asleep as soon as my head hit the pillow. The following week, after repacking some books on the shelf, I returned to my desk and saw a single rose. I turned around anxiously and scanned the faces in the library. Our eyes met, and I smiled. Kyle got up from the table where he sat. He was holding a shoebox in his hand, and he came towards me. "How have you been? Where did you go? I thought I would never see you again." The questions tumbled from my mouth. "Are you ready to leave? I can answer all your questions at Maria's," he said. I nodded and followed Kyle out of the library. After ordering, we sat down and waited in an awkward silence. Our food came and we both picked at our meal. "So, where have you been?" I asked, searching his eyes for answers. He pushed his plate aside and placed the box that he held earlier in front of him. "I had to return home to collect some things. I had a meeting with my dad's lawyer." He came over and sat next to me. He opened the box and took out a few items from it. They looked like souvenirs. I held my breath as I realized that I recognized some of them. "This is my dad with his college buddy," he said as he showed me the picture. There he was, my dad, smiling one of his warm smiles next to Eric and Kyle. Kyle was Eric's son. I finally realized where I recognized Kyle from. It was from pictures that my dad showed me. I began to cry. Kyle tried to console me, but he couldn't understand. Through my tears, I heard myself telling him about my dad's accident, my inheritance from my dad, and my living conditions for the past year. "That's why when I came the other night, your mom said that she didn't know you. Why didn't you